The
Team,
skyline
the
of New York
Q3
City
projections are clear.
shimmered
We must
under the
reallocate
golden light
resources
of the
to capture
setting
this
sun,
growth. This is our
casting
moment.
long reflections across the glass towers of Manhattan. Inside one of the tallest buildings stood Daniel Hayes, a self-made millionaire who had built his empire from nothing. At 48, he was known across the United States as a bold investor, a risk-taker, and a man who never lost his company. Hayes Global Ventures had grown from a small startup in Chicago into a billion-dollar powerhouse. With offices in Los Angeles, Miami, and Boston, tonight was supposed to be his greatest victory. The boardroom on the 52nd floor was filled with senior executives, lawyers, and financial advisors. A long, polished mahogany table stretched across the room, surrounded by leather chairs. At the head of the table sat Daniel, calm but focused. In front of him lay a thick contract nearly 200 pages long, if signed. This deal would merge his company with a powerful tech corporation. Based in Silicon Valley, the merger promised international expansion, government partnerships, and access to cutting-edge artificial intelligence systems. The media was already waiting outside the building. News channels were preparing headlines about the historic agreement. Social media buzzed with speculation. Investors expected growth. Competitors feared his rise. But what no one knew was how much Daniel was risking. This wasn't just another business deal to secure this merger. Daniel had leveraged nearly all of his company's liquid assets. If something went wrong, Hayes Global Ventures could collapse within months. Thousands of employees across America depended on his decision. Their salaries, families, and futures were tied to the signature he was about to place on paper. Daniel leaned back in his chair, listening as his chief legal officer summarized the final points. All terms have been reviewed, the lawyer assured confidently. This is a strategic masterpiece. Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. Two senior executives exchanged brief glances, almost too quickly to notice. Their smiles seemed polished, rehearsed. Daniel tapped the golden pen against the table thoughtfully. He had spent weeks negotiating this agreement. Every clause had been discussed, every percentage calculated, or so he believed. He stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the city. Traffic lights flickered below like moving stars. He remembered his early days, sleeping in a tiny apartment, working 2 jobs, dreaming of success. Everything he had achieved had come from relentless effort and sharp decisions. This deal would either cement his legacy or quietly erase it. Returning to the table, Daniel loosened his tie slightly. The room felt warmer now. Anticipation filled the air. A camera crew had been invited inside to capture the signing moment. For press release footage, Mr. Hayes, one executive said smoothly, sliding the contract closer. "Shall we make history?" Daniel took a slow breath. He opened the contract to the final page, where his signature was required. The pen felt heavier than usual in his hand. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on him outside. The sun dipped below the horizon. Daniel lowered the pen toward the paper, unaware that hidden within the complex legal language of the contract was a clause that could strip him of control and cost him everything he had ever built. And just beyond the glass walls of the boardroom, someone unexpected had noticed something no one else had. While the executives debated numbers inside the shining boardroom, Maria Lopez moved quietly through the hallway with her cleaning cart. The wheels rolled softly across the marble floor of the Manhattan skyscraper. She wore a simple navy blue uniform, her dark hair tied neatly in a bun. Most people in the building barely noticed her. To them she was invisible, just part of the background. But Maria was not as ordinary as she seemed. 5 years earlier, she had been a law student at a university in Texas. She had dreamed of becoming a corporate attorney, fighting complicated cases in powerful courtrooms. Her professors once praised her sharp mind and attention to detail. But life had changed suddenly. Her father became seriously ill, and Maria had to drop out of college to support her family. Medical bills piled up responsibilities, replaced ambitions. Eventually, she moved to New York for better job opportunities and found work as a cleaner in one of the city's most prestigious corporate towers, even though she no longer studied law formally. Maria never stopped learning. She read legal articles online during lunch breaks and kept her old textbooks in her small apartment in Queens. Sometimes while cleaning offices late at night, she would glance at open documents on desks, not out of curiosity but habit. Legal language had once been her world. Earlier that evening, while emptying trash bins near the executive offices, Maria overheard 2 senior executives speaking in hushed, urgent voices. "Clause 47 guarantees the transfer," one whispered. "Once he signs, control shifts within 6 months." The other replied quickly, "He won't even see it coming." Maria froze behind the corner. Her heart-pounding transfer of control. That wasn't normal language for a merger, designed to benefit both sides. She didn't want to eavesdrop. But the tension in their voices alarmed her. Later, when she entered the boardroom to wipe the glass walls, while the meeting had briefly paused, she noticed a printed copy of the contract left open on the table. She knew she shouldn't read it. It wasn't her place. But something inside her refused to ignore what she had heard. Her eyes quickly scanned the pages until she found Clause 47. The wording was complex, layered in technical corporate terminology. However, Maria's legal training allowed her to decode it within seconds. The clause described a conditional equity restructuring event, triggered by minor performance benchmarks. If those benchmarks were not met, benchmarks that were almost impossible to achieve, the majority of voting shares would automatically transfer to the partnering company. It was a trap. Daniel Hayes wouldn't lose everything immediately. It would happen quietly, legally, and strategically. By the time he realized, it would be too late. Maria stepped back from the table, her hands trembling. This wasn't just business competition. It was deliberate manipulation. She thought about ignoring it. After all, she was just a cleaner. If she interfered, she could lose her job. But she also thought about the thousands of employees. Depending on that company, she thought about her own father, who once lost his job because of corporate corruption. Now, as she stood outside the boardroom again, she saw Daniel holding the pen, seconds away from signing. Maria's pulse raced. She had a choice. Stay silent and protect her job, or speak up and risk everything. And time was running out. The boardroom had grown tense. Daniel Hayes hovered over the contract pen, poised as the executives around him smiled confidently. Cameras caught every movement, every expression, waiting for the perfect moment of triumph. Outside, the city lights twinkled, oblivious to the storm brewing inside. Maria Lopez's heart pounded in her chest. She had never spoken up in a room filled with powerful men and women, but she couldn't let this go unnoticed. Her hand shook as she pushed open the glass door, the faint sound of hinges making the room pause. Every head turned. The senior executive's smiles faltered. Security guards stood up abruptly, unsure who the intruder was. Daniel's brow furrowed. "Can I help you?" he asked, glancing at the young woman in the uniform. Her eyes met his steady, despite the fear racing through her veins. I'm sorry to interrupt, sir." Maria began, her voice soft but urgent. "Please check Clause 47 before signing this contract." The room froze. Whispers erupted among the executives. One tried to speak, but Maria continued, ignoring their stares. "It's a hidden clause. It will transfer majority control of your company to the other party. Within 6 months, it's a trap." Daniel's pen hovered midair. He blinked, his mind raced. Could it be? The executive's smiles now looked forced, strained. He motioned for Maria to come closer. "Where did you see this?" he asked quietly. Maria walked to the table, keeping her voice low. "I overheard your conversation earlier, and then I saw the contract left open. I studied law for a few years. I know what this clause means. If you sign now, you'll lose everything quietly. The employees, your shareholders, they won't know until it's too late." The room erupted in chaos. The executives exchanged nervous glances, trying to intervene, but Daniel held up his hand. "Stop," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. He took the contract and flipped rapidly to Clause 47. His eyes scanned the legal jargon, scanning for confirmation. Each word he read felt like a punch to the stomach. It was true. Every hidden condition, every technical loophole. It was a setup, a trap masked by layers of legalities. Daniel's breathing became shallow. His pen, still hovering above the paper, now felt heavier than ever. The executives tried to explain, to defend themselves, but their words were hollow. Their carefully constructed plan had been exposed in seconds. Daniel looked at Maria, a mixture of shock, gratitude, and disbelief in his eyes. How did you know?" he asked quietly. "I studied law in Texas." Maria admitted, "I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't let this happen." For a long moment, Daniel just stared at her. Then slowly he put the pen down. The contract remained unsigned. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply as relief washed over him. One cleaner's courage had prevented the destruction of his empire, the betrayal of thousands of employees, and the loss of everything he had worked for. The room, once filled with confidence and control, was now a place of stunned silence. Outside, the city continued its pulse, unaware that in one skyscraper, a single voice had changed the course of history. Daniel finally spoke again, softer this time. "Thank you." Maria nodded, barely believing what she had just done. And in that moment, both of their lives shifted forever. The boardroom was silent, almost heavy with disbelief. Daniel Hayes leaned back in his chair, letting the realization sink in. The golden pen still rested on the table untouched. Outside, the city lights glimmered against the night sky, but inside time seemed to slow for a moment. Daniel felt the weight of how close he had come to losing everything. The two executives, who had plotted the hidden clause, now looked small and defeated. Their confident smirks had vanished, replaced by strained faces and nervous shuffling. Security quietly stepped forward, guiding them toward the exit, their protests falling on deaf ears. Daniel didn't need to say a word. The betrayal had spoken for itself. Turning his attention to Maria, Daniel could barely hide his awe. She stood quietly near the glass wall, uniform still spotless, eyes steady despite the intensity of the moment. He remembered the words she had whispered, the courage it took to speak up in front of powerful figures. Risking her job and reputation, Maria, he said, his voice calm but filled with respect. You just saved more than a contract. You saved an entire company, thousands of jobs, and frankly me. Maria shook her head, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I just couldn't let this happen, sir. People's lives, they depend on this company, and I couldn't ignore what I saw. Daniel nodded slowly. Your knowledge, your bravery, it's invaluable. I need to ensure this doesn't go unnoticed. He called over his chief legal officer, handing the contract back for a thorough review. Clause 47, he said firmly, is permanently removed. We'll double-check every page. No more surprises. As the team began to adjust the contract, Daniel asked Maria to step aside in a quieter corner. He offered her a proposition that could change her life. Maria, you studied law. You've proven yourself invaluable. Tonight I want to fund your education, to finish law school, and offer you a permanent role as a legal consultant here at Hayes Global Ventures. Maria's eyes widened. She blinked, almost unable to believe what she was hearing. Me really, yes, Daniel said, smiling. Your insight, your courage, it deserves recognition. You've earned it. For the first time in years, Maria felt hope expand in her chest. Her dreams, long set aside to care for her family, were finally within reach again. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to rewrite her own future. The remaining executives and board members watched in silence as Daniel and Maria shared a brief, private acknowledgement of her bravery. Outside, the city thrummed with life as usual, unaware that within this skyscraper, a single act of courage had averted disaster. Later that night, Daniel stood by the window looking out over Manhattan. The city seemed less intimidating, more alive, filled with endless possibilities. He thought of Maria, a cleaner, whose quiet determination had reminded him that, even in a world of power and wealth, courage could come from the most unexpected places. Maria returned to her cart, cleaning supplies in hand. But her steps were lighter now. A new chapter had begun, one she would never forget. She had spoken up when it mattered, and in doing so had changed the course of an empire. In the end, it wasn't money, fame, or power that made the difference. It was honesty, courage, and the willingness to act when no one else could. And for Daniel Hayes and Maria Lopez, that night would mark the beginning of a partnership neither of them had expected, but both would cherish forever.